Is independent media doomed to fail if it takes sponsors? Kyle Kulinski seems to think so. While he and TYT have walked very different roads, both paths raise important questions about funding independent journalism in a capitalist society. Recently, Kyle was interviewed on The Vanguard, a popular and prominent platform for us on the left. Today, I'm challenging Kyle's position, breaking down TYT's backlash, and proposing a realistic path forward for media that values integrity and survival. Independent media, like any other business, because yes, it is a business, has bills to pay. The same goes for the commentators shaping the media landscape. Kyle Kulinski argues that strict funding models based solely on small dollar donations and YouTube ads are the only pure way forward. I disagree. There's a way to strike a balance, working with sponsors who align with our values. Let's break it down. Me being a cynic supreme, I have to address Zach's question from The Vanguard. How do we compete with our own values intact and without basically selling out all of our values along the way? It's a great question. It sets up everything from both their segment and mine. Kyle's initial response was, the only pure way of doing this business in this industry, the only pure way is small dollar donations from the ground up and the default ads on YouTube. That's it. He even goes further to say we have to actually draw a line in the sand and say this counts as independent media and this other thing, whatever it is, you can call it whatever you want, but it's not independent media. Kyle calls the alternative new corporate media. And to his credit, some outlets absolutely fit that label. Midas Touch? Yeah, that's corporate. But the Majority Report? They have sponsors too, yet no one would argue they're corporate sellouts. This framing is where Kyle's argument runs into logical problems. By painting such a rigid picture of what counts as independent, he risks dividing the left rather than strengthening it. Conflating TYT's pivot with this broader issue only muddies the waters further. Yes, TYT deserves criticism for who they've chosen as sponsors, like Polymarket. But the problem is not getting the sponsors, but who the sponsors are. Kyle also takes a jab at Cenk, saying he has business brain, while he himself is just a host or a commentator. But here's the thing. Kyle is no stranger to business brain himself. You don't build a platform worth $2 million by just sitting in front of a camera and talking. His channel's success, his strategic decision to stick to small dollar donations and ads all point to someone who understands the business side of things quite well. So here's where I have some questions for Kyle. If the mom and pop flower shop down the street wants to sponsor the Bull Moose Network, should I refuse? I mean, why advertise a small business? They might influence the stories that I write. How about a local credit union? Can they sponsor me? Credit unions, by their very nature, are more community-focused and aligned with progressive values that big banks aren't. Is that acceptable, or does that violate the purity standard? Or take Ground News, an organization dedicated to media literacy, something that directly benefits the left's position in the long run. Would partnering with them make me corporate? These questions aren't meant to mock Kyle's position, but to highlight its inherent limitations. By drawing a hard line in the sand, he's creating a binary that doesn't reflect the complexity of funding independent media in a capitalist society. To me, the issue isn't whether you take sponsorships, it's who you take them from and how transparent you are about it. While Kyle frames his argument around small dollar purity, TYT's recent controversies offer a different perspective on sponsorships in independent media. TYT built its brand on being a leading voice for progressive independent media. They even crowdfunded $400,000 from viewers to buy a new studio, a remarkable example of grassroots support. But then came the Polymarket sponsorship. And it's easy to see why people reacted negatively. Polymarket isn't just a platform for betting. It speculates on serious issues like wildfires and global conflicts like the genocide in Gaza. That crosses a moral line, and it's why TYT's decision betrayed so many of its longtime supporters, including me. Here's the crux. The issue isn't that they took a sponsor. It's who the sponsor was. Their pivot to accepting money from an entity so at odds with progressive values sparked the backlash, not the idea of sponsorship itself. I also want to draw a distinction here. Sponsorship doesn't inherently compromise independence. It depends on the sponsor and the transparency around that relationship. Not all sponsors are created equal. Think about the local credit unions or small businesses just trying to survive in a market dominated by corporate giants. By partnering with independent media, they are not just advertising. They're aligning with an audience that values community-focused ethical practices. It's a mutual relationship. The media outlet gets financial stability, and the sponsors get visibility with like-minded individuals. This idea of value-aligned sponsorships addresses Kyle's concern about new corporate media. It offers a way to remain independent without succumbing to corporate influence. The key is ensuring those sponsors have no say in the content, period. If sponsors believe in the platforms enough to give them money, then they can trust them and their judgment as well. TYT's misstep with Polymarket isn't a reason to reject sponsorships outright. It's a lesson in being selective and staying true to your principles. It's also a reminder that even well-established outlets can lose sight of their values when the pressures of growth and financial sustainability come into play. Kyle's idea of small dollar donations and ads works for him, but it's not universally scalable. For new outlets or smaller creators trying to break into the space, it's not always realistic to forego sponsorships entirely. The question shouldn't be, do we take sponsors, but rather which sponsors can we take that align with our mission? So what is a realistic path forward for independent media? It's not about rejecting sponsorships outright or holding every outlet to the same rigid standard. It's about recognizing the realities of a capitalist society and finding ways to adapt without compromising integrity. The solution lies in value-aligned sponsorships. Local businesses, credit unions, or mission-driven organizations are examples of entities that align with progressive principles and goals. These partnerships can provide the financial support necessary to keep independent media outlets afloat, while also uplifting like-minded businesses and organizations. But this approach has a critical component: transparency. Audiences need to know who the sponsors are and understand that they have no influence over the content. Trust is the foundation of independent media, and any partnership must preserve that. Take a credit union, for instance. Unlike big banks, credit unions are community-focused, and they operate on a cooperative type principle. They naturally align with progressive values. Partnering with one doesn't compromise independence, it reinforces it. These types of sponsorships strengthen rather than undermine the progressive cause. It's important to acknowledge that Kyle's concerns are real and they're valid. He's right that sponsorships come with risks. Audiences could perceive even value-aligned sponsorships as compromising independence. But the answer isn't to avoid sponsorships entirely. The answer is to ensure that those partnerships are ethical, transparent, and free from editorial influence. This approach also addresses the scalability issue. Kyle's funding model works for his established platform, but smaller creators and new outlets don't have the luxury of relying on small dollar donations. By partnering with ethical sponsors, these creators can gain the resources they need to grow while staying true to their mission. Independent media must focus on its purpose, challenging systems of oppression, promoting progressive values, and delivering impactful journalism. To do that, it needs to survive, and that means adapting to our capitalist reality with clarity and transparency. With these principles, independent media can thrive with integrity. So where does this leave us? By its very nature, independent media has a mission to challenge power. But to do that effectively, it needs to exist, to thrive, be sustainable, and be credible. Kyle Kulinski's model of small dollar donations and YouTube ads works well for him, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's commendable. It's a very commendable approach, but not the only valid path. For many independent creators and smaller outlets, the realities of the media landscape demand something more adaptable. The key lies in building ethical partnerships, value-aligned sponsorships, whether from local businesses, credit unions, or larger organizations. These can provide the lifeline needed to sustain independent media. These partnerships don't just fund content. They create a mutual ecosystem where values are shared, not compromised. The real issue isn't whether sponsorships are taken, it's how they're taken. Transparency and independence must remain non-negotiable. By setting clear boundaries and maintaining an open relationship with their audience, media outlets can secure the funding they need without losing the trust they've built. In the end, purity is a noble idea, but it's not a strategy. Independent media must focus on purpose, challenging systems of oppression, promoting progressive values, and delivering trustworthy, impactful journalism. To do that, it must embrace the complexities of surviving in a capitalist system while staying true to those principles. This isn't about dividing the left or gatekeeping what qualifies as independent media. It's about evolving to meet the moment, recognizing that the tools we use to fight back must adapt to the world we live in. With clarity, transparency, and integrity, independent media can remain independent. Before I sign off, I want to mention that my only sponsor is Kathy, a lovely person who found me through Facebook. I'd also like to thank Deborah, who emailed me wanting to donate, but understandably has family to help in California. It's not much, but they are in my thoughts. Otherwise, that's it for today. I have the usual segments going up, and I'll see all of you in the next episode of Bull Moose News. Tell me what you think in the comments. Can independent media take sponsors and stay true to its values? Let me know what you think. Eyes open, voices loud. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.